Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Aquarian Insights. On today's episode, I sit down for a wonderful conversation with the creator and pioneer of Floralive Flower Essences, Dr. Brent Davis. Dr. Davis is an absolute wealth of experience and has traveled all over the world finding these beautiful, powerful flowers that can initiate healing in everyone on the deepest levels. We discuss the role of using Floralive in athletics, with everyday people, and with chronic disease. And Dr. Davis goes deep into the science of how these flower essences actually work and what separates them from other flower essences. The biggest takeaway I want everyone to have from this talk is what I left people with in my podcast about flower medicine and the history of it. And the question I posed was, what if we had a simple, elegant solution that could eliminate past trauma and conditioned responses so that we could show up for our loved ones and our community more? Remove our limiting beliefs that impede us in our relationships and our career and allow us to overcome past family issues. Would you do it? These flower essences have become a pivotal part of our practice, as we've seen time and time again initiate beautiful, incredible changes within people, within families, and within communities. So whether you're someone suffering from a chronic illness, professional athlete, or someone looking just to empower themselves and improve their lives, do yourself a favor and go to floralive.com to learn more, and please enjoy this episode. Today, I am so grateful to have Dr. Brent Davis with me. And Dr. Davis is the founder and developer of Floralive. And Floralive has become one of the most important aspects of my clinical practice these days. And I truly believe it is a medicine for our time. So thank you, Dr. Davis. I appreciate you being here.
I'm great, and to be here, it's an honor because we've had these off-camera discussions, and boy, you really understand some stuff. So it's great to make sure to give your background of where you're placing this stuff. Where does this go in your total practice, which is very eclectic.
Yeah, I don't often talk about myself. I'm usually talking to other folks, but a little background about me. I've been a chiropractic physician for almost 20 years now, believe it or not. And I've been very fortunate to have a diverse experience in my clinical practice. And so it has always been a dichotomy between sports performance on one hand, and then severe complex conditions on the other hand. And the sports performance side of thing culminated in me actually traveling with professional golf for almost a decade. And I would go on the road and see people and do that in that regard, and then come home to my clinic in Orlando and see chronic neurodegenerative disorders, chronic neurodevelopment disorders. And as we work through things, and whether it's pain or performance or function and all of these different things, like everyone and like every physician, I studied functional medicine, studied classical homeopathy, did Taoist medicine, acupuncture, all of these things in trying to find solutions for problems. And very quickly, I recognized that even physical symptoms, there is a higher order thing at play here, and it's the psycho-emotional aspect of health and wellness, and all of these things play into it. And that led me to energy psychology, that led me to applied kinesiology, and all of these different tools in trying to come up with the best treatment program or the best remedies for people. And so when I personally discovered Floralive, I was just completely amazed, not only in the transformation within myself, my friends and family, but I am consistently amazed at the ability of these beautiful uncut flower essences to create change in people, not only at a psycho-emotional level, but also on a physical level and energetic level. And Dr. Davis is definitely a man of my own heart. And he's the Indiana Jones of flower essences. He's traveled all over the world and had a beautiful life finding and discovering or rediscovering probably these beautiful, powerful flower essences. And so, Doc, perhaps we start there and how you develop this. And I know you've been dealing with herbal medicine for a very long time now, and the natural culmination of that has really been the Floralive flower essences.
Yeah. You know, understanding, I started practice in 1978, my first year of practice. I began an herbal company because from the moment I started practice, yeah, I did my undergrad at UCLA, and during that whole time, I was studying ethnomedicine and stuff. So before I ever got out of chiropractic school, I already had an orientation. I wanted to be a general practitioner as a chiropractor, but I really always have practiced more like the old fashioned, the real naturopaths, the real guides that unfortunately sort of like has happened with osteopathy. Some of that's been lost, okay, in naturopaths. Some of them are, depending on where they are and their ability to prescribe drugs and medicines, medications, they've kind of lost some of the great traditions. And so that was a background in 2 years of training in classical homeopathy, and I mean Hahnemannian classical homeopathy from a great Indian homeopath. Before he passed away, that was my teacher. So I had that, very eclectic background, and I understood from the beginning, the first thing we did was to make sure I could make the best fresh plant herbal extract available. They weren't, hardly anyone was doing that in the United States. They would get organic herbs, maybe, if you were lucky, and then they would make an extract of it, and maybe they would do spagyric on it if you happen to find somebody that would ash the plant when it was dead. But they were missing something that was very important, that was the basis of homeopathy, which is the fresh plant extract. That is the mother tincture, and that's what's called original drug strength. And then from that you make 1X, and then from 1X you make 2X, so on and so on. But it comes from, if it's an herbal substance, almost always, there was an effort to get it while just prepare it from plant right after it's been picked. And that got stopped due to our regulatory folks, the wonderful regulatory compliance folks that said, no, you really can't do that because there's no way to measure the water content accurately. And so we just won't work for our definition of homeopathy. So that's why that largely stopped in the 90s. In Europe, they still have the equipment to comply with that, which is very sophisticated stuff that allowed them to measure the water content by percent on a fresh plant herbal extract before it went in for extraction. And then they could report that to the agency that had no business sticking their nose in it, because it doesn't matter. You just weigh out the stuff, because why? What are you going for? What you're going for is the dynamic, vital, living energy, which has to do with scalar energy, is the key, because it's the life force energy. And that's what communicates through the dimensions to produce not only outcome from physical chemistry, the compounds. Golden seal's got very strong alkaloids in it. These are physical things upon which regular medicine stole the ideas and then tried to patent and produce them as synthetic. But it came from nature. But what was missing was the understanding of fresh plant extract. So we did that in 1981 and got the first really high quality echinacea, tri-species echinacea, which is still the standard for that in the world. In 1981, that was 4 years before it became a household word. 1985 is when echinacea really broke loose. It was in all our health food magazines 4 years later. But for about 4 years, we were the only product like that and got a very large following. And then from that, the herb company just sort of grew with professionals. So it has continued. But anyway, that went on from 1981 until 2000, when I had a vision that is described in the Floral Hand of God book. And there's a website, thefloralhandofgod.com, that has a little tab that says podcast. And on that, I am reading the essential chapters of the book. And people can listen to that. It's on Spotify and Apple Music, and it's on all those. But you can also just go to the website and listen to it. It's for free on thefloralhandofgod.com. And I really encourage people to do that, because it has this unbelievable story of what I call the long tail of serendipity. The long tail, but it's the long tail of serendipity because the way that these things have been discovered is absolutely impossible because there's too many serendipitous events all stacked on top of one another for the discovery to be made on countless trip after trip after trip. So finally, I realized it was guided, and I just quit worrying about it. You know, okay, I'm gonna go this. I'm gonna go to the Philippines. I got the sense I got to go there, but I don't know anybody there. I don't know. I wonder how that's going to happen. So I went to a conference in Sedona. I had a little booth there, and a guy walks in. He said, you know, and he looked around. It was huge, a big guy, 6'2", imposing, had a bald head, looked like a genie, you know, big man. He walks right straight up to me, and he goes, he looks at my table. He looks at me, he goes, oh, so I had a name tag. He said, so you're Dr. Davis, yeah? I said, yeah. He said, oh, it's interesting. I was driving through Arizona, and my guides told me to go to Sedona. When I got on the road here, they told me where to get off, and I didn't know where I was going, but I'm here. I looked and I said, what? He said, no, I wasn't coming to this conference, but I guess I'm supposed to meet you. So I started talking to him and said, yeah, I just spent 3 years in the Philippines and I miss it a lot. So I said, well, if I pay for your trip, will you be my wingman? I said, yeah, I'm there. So 3 weeks later, we were on the way to the Philippines, and none of what I did there would have ever been possible without that guy. Now, what's that for a story? Did I make it up? Of course not. That's what happens, you know, when things are guided. I'm driving through Arizona and something tells me to get off and drive to Sedona. And I saw, when I was driving on the main road, I saw this thing that said some holistic conference. He said, I don't know, looks good, and I'll go in there. And there you were. It's hilarious. So that the book tells of these remarkable things, and to let people know that a higher force and a higher hand is behind it. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing. That's the reason for telling these tales. Sound like tales, but they're true. All these things are absolutely true. It happened in the book. And I wrote that pretty much a year and a half ago, just under dictation. I saw patients, but I didn't do anything else. Sometimes for days I wouldn't really eat much. I just did this book. And it took a lot to do that. And it really does cover a lot of bases. It talks about flower essences, but it talks about the conceptual framework that tells us how necessary it is to get this leg up to deal with the challenges that we now have. I point out in the book, in one of the chapters, that I was present at the development of energy psychology in the mid-1980s. That's another reason why these flower essences are different, because they were conceived out of the understanding of energy psychology. So, and there's a chapter that deals with 4 or 5 ways that flower essences are made, and 3 or 4 ways that they're made without cutting the flowers. I'm not the only person that figured out that flowers should not be cut. So there's a chapter devoted to that, to explain how, and some other people are producing some great remedies. You know, so I don't want to make that comment that they're not. They're getting some great help and doing wonderful things. But Floralive is still, nevertheless, is unique. The Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology at one point had 600 members. I don't know where it is now, but when I went to one of their conferences, I wrote a chapter in the book about that. It was very, very interesting when I went there. And I saw how many techniques there were to change the unconscious mind, physical, tapping techniques, various things, parts of it, maybe some hypnotic suggestions, and all these different things in there that were there to change the unconscious mind. Well, what was fascinating was my experience with one of the founders of it, which within about a minute, without ever talking to him about a history, all I did was match the flower that his being showed he needed. And I told him what it was, and he sat up at me and said, how in God's name would you know that without ever talking to me? And without ever knowing? He said, and I've done work after work. I've gone through all of this, but they're all powerful. It's changed my life. But that's the one thing that hasn't changed. And you did that in just a moment with this flower? You can do that? But energy psychology can be very complicated, and often is. Floralive is not. So let's go look at that model that makes it so simple, the triangle. And that's on the web page. So if you go, and let's try and get a full page of that. There we go. That's right on the homepage at floralive.com. And this summarizes, with this and one other diagram, summarizes all of this work for so many years. And when I was in the 1980s and 1990s, I took all kinds of conferences on stress relief. And I really have always specialized in mind-body healing. So I studied an awful lot of stuff. And when you can reduce it down to something this simple, it's pretty cool. You've got to clear trauma first. Now, people know that. I mean, there are a lot of traumatologists out there. There's a lot of people. But at the time I created this, that little schematic came in 2013. But it was really born years before that. And there are not that many people who are speaking about it. You've got to do that first. Then you have to enable receiving. And I learned that because of one flower in Peru that was the most important flower of an incredibly advanced shaman. And he shared that. He showed me the flower. He said, this is such an important flower, but he never told me what it was for. So I made an extract of it and I found out what it was for. Surely he knew that, but he didn't tell me. It enables us to receive love. When we're traumatized, we stop receiving love. We shut down. And then when you've done 1 and 2, then you try and go, ta-da! Then you take all those seminars on empowerment, because when you empower something before you've cleared trauma and enabled yourself to receive love, you could become a powerful monster. We have a lot of those on the planet. They didn't do it in right order. They got power before they were able to handle it, and they become sociopaths, of which we have so many running around the planet today. Powerful sociopaths. So let's go to that next frame. When you click on it, it says read more information. This is it. This is the essence of Floralive. You don't have to read volumes and books, and you don't have to take advanced training. You just have to understand this model, which comes from my cumulative knowledge over 20 years in the healing arts. I realized that this is a relevant model. So you can read the whole thing, but when you're traumatized, it could be physical or emotional, and it could be recurring violation of your personal space or core invalidation. So core invalidation means a dad that never said good job.
Yeah.
Or just always found fault with everything you did, no matter how hard you tried. That can destroy people. And then when you ask them, well, what were your parents like? I always ask that question. I say, hey, how was your upbringing? And it's very common in people that I know have serious problems. Very often they'll say, this is the kid. When you hear this is my little ears go like that when I hear it. They were good. They were good parents. Or sometimes they'll say, well, they really tried to be good. And if they say they tried to be good parents, oh boy. Then I got the next question for them. Well, what happened? Did they? Because people don't like to generally speak bad about their parents. So it's just, I just have seen that over the years. They just don't like, so my dad was a real asshole. No, they don't like this. They may feel it, but they often don't say it. So core invalidation is huge, or physically being beaten up, or hearing your favorite sibling being shredded by one of the parents that has a bad chronic relationship with that sibling. Any of those things are trauma. And it's actually, in my experience, easier to fix someone that was beaten once or twice a month. It's easier to fix them than somebody that had core invalidation every day. Because the person that knew they were going to get hit kind of got used to it. They got there, they got hit, and then they went on, and it was abuse and it was trauma. But it's actually, I don't know. Do you agree with that, Doc?
I do, yeah. And as far as like a child-parent relationship, one of the most challenging things that I've seen is, unfortunately, some parents use different types of manipulation tactics and other things to invalidate their children's feelings and beliefs. And that is a far longer road than physical trauma, to your point.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's it. And not that we want people to be getting hit and beaten, but
No.
from experience, it's that low level, what I call core invalidation. That can be a real mess. So anyway, what happens is you turn off or you check out. You become not in your body. So one of my friends said, when you're not in your body, someone else will occupy it. You know, be careful. The old expression, deer in the headlights. Many of the people that I took in the early 2000s, and I would take those, some of them on the website, you look at the eyes and there's no one there. Go, oh, where are you? They're gone. They're not in their body. And you can see it in the eyes right away if you get used to looking at that. And so people check out, they turn off. Now, when they turn off, it's because it's a defense. And therefore, they have to judge everything to figure out if it's safe or not. And they have to be in a state of control. So they have judgment on everything and they become control freaks. Bad combination. And it's there in a lot of people. It was there in me. I had a very traumatic, wonderful people that were just really good people that did their best, that created a huge amount of damage in my life. That set me up to be a good healer, actually, is what that turned out. But I'd never wish that for anyone. And it was a mother that manipulated everything and was highly intelligent and was able to manipulate things in a way that you never found out until later. And then it created anger and rage. So manipulation creates anger and rage. And I have great remedies to get rid of anger and rage because I had to be healed from that. Not that I still don't have some. I get pretty unhappy when I see people destroying the world like they are. That makes me, still got some of that down. But so then when you check out, you turn off, you're in judgment, you're in control, it makes it really hard to receive love or friendship. And if you cannot receive love, you can't attract money generally, unless you have some little dark threads of the dark side running through you. Then you can attract money and be a real evil son of a gun. You still can attract great wealth, but you're just doing it with a different set of rules. If you want to do it in the light, now I love wealth. I hope someday I get there. I'd love it. If you gave me $25 billion, I'd hire a whole bunch of really cool people and have them do a whole bunch of projects. I probably wouldn't drive a Ferrari. I might get a better car, but that wouldn't be important. So no matter how much money I ever have, I'll know how to use it. And I like wealth. I think wealth is fantastic. Just use it well. We really require, and I hope we get some billionaires that are not controlled. But so I do want to get empowerment. We do want to see people get wealth and the ability to use that wealth to really change some things. But you got to fix the stuff before that will come in the right way, in the way that's good for the world. So that's it. That's it. When you fix the abuse and the trauma, and you get rid of judgment and control, and you just allow yourself to receive love, then so many of the flower essences in Floralive are able to help bring greater empowerment. So I want to tell some stories. You and I, Dr. Brendan, I think other than I want to tell a little story about one athlete. I hope to see him as a key major player in the NFL. I think he'll be a star quarterback in the NFL. But let's see if he gets there. He's still in college. And that's all my experience with Barry. And his mom was a triple medalist and a gold medalist. So I've treated a few high-level athletes, but not that many. And you've treated a lot of high-level athletes. So we have a little bit of stories about that. And then we're treating people on the opposite, completely disabled people. They can't function, certainly could never do high-level sports because they're so disabled. And that's the other side of it. So it's really interesting to look at both of them, and then kind of everybody in between. But we should tell some stories on what should be remedies and how Floralive can be with people that will never understand the holistic model of Floralive. They're not they're a professional athlete. They're a meat and potato kind of guy or gal. And they come to you because you got a skill set that's going to help them win. And that's all they care about.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them out there. But there's a whole group of people in athletics that aren't going to ever look at that model and go, oh, that's enthralling. I love that. They're just not going to go there. I would hope that the Floralive Essences can get into their mix of things that they take, because they're so powerful for changing things, even when people don't know they're changing. So I want to tell one little short story of a guy that had a mother who was enormously well-versed in holistic model. And I'll bet that some of your athletes that are high-level athletes were not well, deeply versed.
Oh.
Right. Okay. So you can speak from that level. I'm going to speak from this level of the guy whose mom was a gold medalist, highly motivated, but also was a consultant for her husband, who's an NFL trainer, and they do special projects for training guys that are high-level athletes by cleaning up their diet and so on. That's the guy's mom. So he was in a very, very special, wonderful place where she was so familiar with holistic doctors from Colorado. She moved to Nashville because of her coaching position her husband took on. And so she finds me in the elevator somewhere. She found me online. She comes in and when I saw this one, I went, oh my God, this one knows a lot of stuff. And so she starts telling me about her son. She said, he's just so naturally skilled. We know this. We're both professional athletes. His father was a high-level guy and high up in the NFL with a trainer, and she's a gold medalist. And they're looking at this boy. You can just see he's built for athletic. But she said he's getting sick every year, cyclically. It happens every fall. There's Chinese medicine states why that happens when the fall seasons change, and there's all kinds of energetic stuff that happens. So you see people that get sick every year in fall. And he'll miss practices. Then he'll have a great game and he'll be ready for the game. He can't, Doc, can you do something? So that's when I started out doing just good old physical medicine and all the electrodermal and not electrodermal, but electro stuff to put frequencies into this guy to get rid of infection. And use herbal stuff and homeopathic stuff. And had to get rid of infection. Well, I was able to do that in about 2 or 3 months, and that was the end of that. He just didn't get sick anymore. Well, when you don't get sick and you're the phenomenal athlete, oh my God, 175 pounds. He's now 225. He recently came in and saw me just because he wanted to see me because he hadn't seen me for long. The guy is unbelievable, just an incredible specimen, powerful. And I'm so pleased and proud to see where he's gone. But then where did my treatment turn? It turned toward here. It turned toward the mind, but then came Floralive. And it's mind game. And of course, anybody that's in professional athletes hires trainers and coaches, and geez, they spend a lot of money on these guys to clear up their headspace. And books, huge numbers of books have been written on this. So I did a lot of energy psychology with this guy. But it got down to they were in junior year, they were in the playoffs, they were going to go for state champions. And they missed it. They were in the finals and they just let this other team beat them. They just he didn't perform. And his lineman didn't perform and his halfback didn't perform. They just didn't perform in the football. So, so then the next year comes around, seniors. So now this time, he's got a lot of essences and we're getting like, anytime anybody causes a problem the previous year and they're going to see the same team again, we simply had him visualize the problems, the tackles, the stuff that these other very good players were getting him on. We found that it caused weakness and we did a countermeasure to get rid of that. He would get them in the next game and trounce him. They had no effect on him whatsoever. He just wasn't affected because he already got clear that it wasn't going to create a problem. And Floralive was very important for that as well. So it came down to they were quarterfinalists, then they were semifinalists, and then it was that same team that had beat them the year before was also in the finals of that year. So for state championship. So we had to find a flower essence that counterbalanced the unbelievably skilled. I didn't know that was possible, but the one kid was both on the offensive and defensive teams. He never got a rest. They put him in positions on defense, and then I didn't even know you could do that, but he played both sides. I've never seen such a skilled player. This guy was unbelievably skilled, and he had a way of getting in on my patient and aggravating him. And tackling him, blocking the shots or whatever. He was just an unbelievably skilled player. Again, he was rendered absolutely impotent. He didn't do anything. He had nothing. And they won. So, and I've seen that. That's the greatest example of just over 2 or 3 years watching this guy just get better and better and better as we found out what the limiting beliefs were with use of various techniques, including the Floralive essences. I've got names for some of the products, and maybe you and I can work it out, Dr. Brennan, where we'll be able to create some special remedies for professional athletes, because there are some that just give them that leg up. And they're not ever going to break any laws for, drug use. They're not drugs. They're not, but it gives them tremendous empowerment. And there are a few formulas that I know that should be put out for professional use. Hopefully we can do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm very excited for that. And what I would say too, my experience with professional sport, professional hockey, baseball, team sport, but the most time that I've spent is in professional golf. And that's very interesting because essentially you're alone with your thoughts for 5 to 6
I told you that.
months.
I said the only experience, I've never treated a golfer. You treated a very famous one, but it is absolutely, it's the course, but it's this up here. It's like,
Yes. And when we originally talked ahead of this interview, I went back and I looked, and every single player, knock on wood, but every single player that I've started on a Floralive program has won a professional event in the last 18 months.
Isn't that interesting?
Interesting, right? So one of the things, though, is one of my biggest frustrations in working with sport for a long time before I was fortunate enough to discover Floralive is a lot of athletes will manifest illness, manifest injury, manifest all of these things because of past traumatic experiences replaying, whether it's another team or it's a specific event in the case of golf. And other techniques and other things that we would utilize would work a little bit, but it wasn't until I found Floralive that I could solve that problem. Say,
Yeah.
right.
It took
And
what I say is that, and we'll do some special things in the future with our friend from Europe, commenting, I hope, on this, but where is memory held?
Right.
Memory is held in hyperspace. And that's why the concept of cloud computing is really, really interesting, because that's what we're doing. Most of technology is emulating human beings. It's not the other way around. What we draw from cumulative memory held in hyperspace, and our brain is a transceiver. That stuff's not held in here, but I mean, if you get a head injury, it can surely affect the way your transceiver receives information from hyperspace, but it's all held up there. It's in a great cloud storage device, the real cloud.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's what Floralive accesses. It accesses the cloud.
And especially in golf, one of the biggest things is, and this is true in all sport, but we have we discuss kind of the parental role on how things are developed. And a lot of times athletes have these core invalidations above and beyond other folks because of the pressure to perform and play from a such young age. And you have one specific flower essence, which centers around the idea that I can only get worth if I work extremely, extremely hard.
So my value, let's give them the exact test phrase.
Yes. Give
My
them the exact.
value as a human being, now remember the language, my value as a human being is measured by how hard I work.
Yes.
I don't work hard, I don't have any value. And that's the opposite of what all these guys teaching manifestation. You should be able to do nothing and be a millionaire. Well,
Yeah.
that's not quite true, but our birthright is abundance. Should be.
Yes.
And so we shouldn't have to work hard to have value. But yes, you're right. That's an amazing remedy. Yeah.
And that's been, especially in the golfing world, that's been incredibly important. And what I see in athletes so much is not only do their limiting beliefs potentially affect their performance, but it affects how they prepare and it affects their ability to recover.
Mm-hmm.
and you can't out supplement or out diet your mind, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so by introducing these with guys and girls that play very, very high level professional sport, it's been sort of a wonderful gift.
Yeah, yeah. That truly is a good insight. There are many, but
Mhm.
just again, the importance of Flor de la Luna,
Yes.
one of the pivotal remedies of the great shaman that I was able to meet in the high Andes. With its sacred substance, it's a flower, but this is something I point out in the book. Where I get the flower, that's actually why I dropped the patents. The products are still made by international patents and local, but I realize it doesn't matter if somebody tried to copy the patents, they can never emulate the remedies because of where the flowers come from, which will always remain a secret. These essences can never be copied. Other people could try to, but they can't because of the unusual nature of how, like, this one region had huge underground crystals that were energized that gave rise to piezoelectric energy in the earth that then went into the flowers. Very complicated. But it ended up with that flower in that region being able to trip the mechanism that allows the being to receive love. That's huge. It has to do with all levels of performance and patience and people. There's a flower called blue lechinoltia that comes from way in the outback in Australia. And you know that one, I'm pretty sure, blue lechinoltia.
I do, yes.
The beautiful flower. I am kind to myself. If you're beaten up on yourself, oh man, God, I was 1 point away. I just missed that last putt, and damn it, I would have had the whole thing. And then you beat yourself up to pieces. And then there are some gentians that do the same thing. Gentian is very special. No, I allow myself to receive love, and I'm kind to myself. But blue lechinoltia and blue gentian, which comes from the high Andes, those are tremendous so people don't beat up on themselves.
Yes.
Because if you get in that pattern, that will kill your game.
Yeah. My hope for humanity is just getting this out to people, because it's just I think the biggest thing above and beyond professionally for me is I've used them personally. Because anytime I take on a new idea or a new remedy or a new technique, I'm always going to try it on myself first, experience it, and so I can better communicate it to people. And so with Floralive, I did exactly that. And I went down the rabbit hole of everything and explored everything myself. And it's been a fantastic tool for personally, for friends and family, above and beyond with patients.
Can you recall when you started out, what was the first thing that you were directed to and what the effects were?
Yeah, so I think I've had several interesting experiences with flow, like many, many interesting experiences with flow. The first thing I did, I said, you know what, I'm not going to create any potential assumptions of what I may need based on test phrases. So I started with revival, and I went through your Abundant Life program. So I started with revival, and then Abundant Life 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the biggest things for me in those initial phases was a lot of, I began to realize a lot of the stories that I had told myself over the years, or things that I didn't think I could do, or situations that I didn't think I could be in. We all say that, oh, like that's not for me, or that I shouldn't do this, or, I'm not that type of person.
Mhm.
We communicate those things out loud, I think all we're doing is just unconscious limiting beliefs are coming to the
Oh
forefront.
yeah, no question. And we have been beaten into submission to give away our greatness. And especially
Correct.
those people that tend to be the old ancient healers have had to undergo great trauma throughout the ages, and they develop a sort of a withdrawal, or the genuine ones, quite often a humility, and sometimes they don't accept the power that they are.
Yeah.
So they're hurting themselves by not accepting the power that they are. And so that's why I asked you, what did you do the Abundant Life program? If we did nothing more than those 5 products
Mhm.
forever, that's it. We never did anything else. the effects from that are so profound because I wanted to create one thing in the early years that was done, I think between 2000 and maybe it was finished by 2003 or 4, maybe 2006. I'm not sure how long it took, but I was on fire when I started, and I prepared a lot of flowers. I mean, that was my life. That's what I did. And I had so I just took time that I didn't even have, but I just did that until I was like being pushed or prompted from somewhere. I just went on fire and did that. And so many of those flowers come from the Floralive forest. That's why it's so beautiful to realize that as it grows, that the revenue that's generated from that comes from those flowers that are in this place that I was guided to live, which will become an intentional community when we can. And so a lot of them come from there. And the order that I found them was the order in which they need to be given to humans.
When I read your book, The Floral Hand of God, that was the thing that was just so beautiful and elegant in its own right, is they presented themselves to you in the perfected manifestation and exactly how you're supposed to go through them. And I thought
Order
that,
in which, I wouldn't know that. These are dispensations that are not linked to humans.
yes.
They are divine.
Yeah.
They are frequency code that came from the divine, put into flowers, so that people in their suffering could, at the right time, be given this, and their suffering will be relieved nearly instantaneously. That is a dispensation, and with so little effort. Okay, so what does a psychological evaluation cost? 125 to 250 bucks, maybe 300. If it's a psychiatrist, could be $400 for an initial eval. What happens during that? Nothing. Basically, I mean, it really doesn't. You just get to know the person. So you spent 150 to $400. Life could be transformed for $49.95. The cost of one of our combination essences. That is a dispensation. That's a divine dispensation. Because the value of that, can you look at one of the flowers, one of the pictures that I gave you? So that was a 2-week period. That primarily came from the flower called tulip poplar. And tulip poplar, the test phrase is, my self-esteem is strong and balanced. So what do you think about the picture on our left as we view that, the one dated 5/3? Does that look like that person has strong self-esteem or not?
Absolutely not.
I would say not, for any of us that look at people, patients. What happened to his self-esteem 2 weeks later? What in God's name happened? The actual bony structure of his face changed.
Yes.
He's like looking at you like, hey, dude, what's up? What's up? He's like hip. And he went, and it absolutely transformed his life. That was because tulip poplar is in revival, along with many other very important flowers. This happened, I'm sure, hundreds of times that we don't know about, but this one was in my office, and I took those photos. So the next one, go to the lady, the dark-haired Latina woman. Well, that's this one. This one still to this day is so hard to believe, because when she came in on the 12th of that month, May, she was at the end of her rope. Single mom, beleaguered, and a teacher in the public school district to classes that she could not manage and control and did not have any support. So she was at the end of her rope. I mean, in five, what was I doing? I don't know whether I created a custom blend for her, but probably gave her revival as well. And I had to take that picture on the right about 5 times. The way the pictures are taken is you tell a patient, close your eyes. And I had the camera all in focus. I take it on a tripod. And then I just say, open your eyes in the non-smiling resting expression. They have to not smile, because when people, have their photo taken, they all smile. You instruct them very specifically, you cannot smile, you have to close your eyes, and then just simply open your eyes. So I kept telling her, stop smiling. In the second picture, she said, I'm not smiling. And that actually happens a lot. People's being undergoes that amount of radical change.
Yeah.
So, and the first one, which is still the most unusual one that I've ever seen, that one, a total bony change in her face, and had extreme trauma over many years, and her first incoming. And she was one of the 23 people that were in that study that we did that was done out of the Assembly of People in Santa Barbara, California. She was one of the people that completed that study for 1 month with nothing else. They did not, they were instructed for the study. It was a big effort to do this. By the way, as a single practitioner, without proper support and adequate, to do this was like insane, because all of these were carefully controlled. The PhD that was in charge of it had I didn't ever see the results. She did everything, and she all did the statistics on it and so on. And those are science section of the website, floralive.com, has that study that was done. But her eyes orbits changed. If you do cranial therapy, the entire structure of her cranium changed. And these pictures, the before and after, they're superimposed. You take the after picture and you make sure that the aspect ratio is identical, which is the distance between the center of the irises.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to, if you superimpose this picture on the right, they're exactly identical. So that what that means is the structural changes of the face are not artifacts. They're real. Yeah. So you look at that and you go, oh, come on, that's crazy. But there have been several. I've had about 15. And then in the last years of my practice, I just didn't have time to do this. But it was, in my mind, it was proven. I had done enough of it. It produces these astonishing changes. And certainly not in everyone. But if you're careful, you will see facial changes. And for doctors that do cranial therapy, a lot of our flower essences release dural tension.
Yes.
Your sutures will get more expansive.
Yes.
And it can be, for people that measure it, that are good at cranial therapy, you can give the essence and they can take and feel it right away. So that's a really cool thing too, for people that do advanced cranial therapy. They see these essences. When people have been resistant to change, you can give them the essences, and the sutures all just, if you give the right thing, they ease up, they open up. They do have physical effects.
Yes.
But they were never designed for that.
No.
But anything that's this powerful, you can imagine, surely it would. And so one of the things that is, we're never going to be able to market it or sell it for this, but we have a lot of undesirable effects, presumably, in the body for the time period starting in 2021 up to current. Got a lot of stuff going on in people's bodies for the various reasons that those of us that follow these things, we know the reasons that these things are going on. And the energetic components of that are very alarming. What's being introduced into bodies. And in many cases, the Floralive frequencies are countermeasures to that.
Yes. And clinically, that has been my experience, and I'm just grateful that I've had that tool during this time, because the standard protocols that are out there that are attending to sort of physical sequelae of these things are fine and good, but a lot of people will come in still experiencing very severe symptoms, and it's not until we use the Floralive essences that gets relieved. So
that's very good that you're seeing that as well. So when I was in the throes of the sickness, I don't have my practice in Nashville anymore. I'll reopen it here in the country at some point here in the future. But I see patients on an as needed basis, but I don't have an active practice right now. But I just see them because I've known them. I know them as a healer. But yeah, starting in 2020, actually, really much longer than that, starting in about 2004, as soon as I read about mycoplasma fermentans, and the fact that it was very much implicated in Gulf War syndrome, and somehow got out into the general public. And then I realized later, that's been a backbone upon which a lot of this stuff has been built. So I was already kind of aware of all that stuff before these terrible maladies hit people.
Mhm.
So it wasn't a surprise to me when I saw it. I went, oh, okay. It just, there's more people getting hit with this stuff, but it really wasn't any different than stuff I was seeing in 2017, 18, 19, that I was seeing the same stuff. It just got noticed by more people and up regulated, and however that was all turned up, it just got turned up a lot more. So I had a lot of protocols in place, and I was just using it for average patients. I wasn't trying to treat the named disease or this named so-called virus substance, which is not a virus, of course. According to folks' postulates, there's nothing there. That there's nothing there. But there was very sick people. People were very sick. We had to figure out why. And so it was a wonderful part of the mix of trying to get those folks well.
Yes.
Yeah. And was part of the mix. There's a lot of other things that need to be done. But anyway, so you've had that experience too. What is it that these flower essences do physically? I'm trained in science too, and I was curious to know. You can measure outcome studies, which we did one. We did that month-long outcome studies. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So this is talking about the different kinds of science. Here you got hard science, and scroll on down a little bit more, keep going, and then the next one is this was comparing it to the leading formula that's made by that came out of Dr. Bach's work. We got that substance, and we sent that off to Germany, to the institute over there that is the world leader in quantum biology, Fritz Albert Pop's Institute. And I sent a bottle of Revival. Revival was our flagship remedy. That with human support now is, and then there's the formula that was made by two companies, actually, the Bach Flower Company and one other one, make the 5 flowers that go into the Bach Flower Essences, the most famous flower essence that there is. They sell so much of it. So we compared these two together. We just wanted to find out, was there a difference? And Dr. Pop is absolutely an ingenious way of figuring out, first of all, creating a counter that can measure one photon at a time, one light particle at a time. And he found out that if you take a substance, in this case, the flower essence, and you send a very precise amount of photon light into it, you measure, and you can do that. You can take the instrumentation, it's extremely reproducible, completely reproducible, doing one sample and another. So you take this stuff that was made by the formula of Dr. Bach, and you take the Floralive Revival, and you hit them exactly the same amount of light for the same period. And then you measure the amount of light that's re-emitted, and you measure the light with a photon counter. You can get an actual exact number of the amount of counts per second or millisecond of how much re-emitted light. And the amount of re-emitted light indicates the vitality of the substance. We did that, and our stuff was 27% more re-emitted light. All right, let's go on down. So that was a very fine example. This came from Dr. Tiller's laboratory. My science advisor, William Tiller. His principal was his grad student in Stanford, and then that man stayed with him for 30 years, 40 years. He was the only person able to create an environment that can measure these extremely subtle changes in a space. The space is very controlled and it's sealed from everything else. And they put one of our remedies in the middle of the space and measured what happened to the, it's called gauge symmetry. These are all complicated concepts, and they're dealt with. The center part of my book tries to describe some of this. A lot of people are not caring about that. They don't want to get into the science of it, but it is there for those who care about it. So gauge symmetry is if you can increase the free energy in a space, it becomes more organized and it becomes more efficient. So what this thing did is it said, if we go on down, scoot down the page a little bit, but what happened is with this substance sitting in this chamber, it started to put out a waveform that over 3 weeks got really, really powerful. And what it meant was that it was changing the organization of the entire space, making it more coherent, and therefore it would make it operate better. That's a non-technical expression. And when they found that, they saw that, they were very surprised. They said, this is really interesting, because they had not seen that before. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Yeah, this was a different scientist in Switzerland, where again, we took the well-known flowers that are in Dr. Bach's formula, and we put it against our product Revival. And this is using some very sophisticated, reproducible technologies to measure the coherence and the frequency range of the two different products by putting a probe directly into the product. And so the coherence is greater, the organization is greater on Revival than it was on the very famous, world famous remedy that comes out. No one has done this kind of science, but it's rather interesting. And it doesn't matter whether you get involved in it or not. It's the practical aspects is it operates and it allows greater function, because it's allowing us to drop away these things which are hindrances. I think that's it, you know.
Yeah, and I think in discussions past, before we got to meet face to face, I consumed all of your lectures and everything I could possibly find. And in discussions past, I think an important thing that you elucidated was when you have trauma and we start initiating those things, there is also physical changes in the body that do occur. And it shifts enzyme processes, and it shifts proteins, and it shifts all of these things inside of our body. So even if I'm of the mind that, okay, the psycho-emotional stuff may not matter to me, it does, because if you get the right essences, it is literally allowing your body, not only on a higher level, but on a real biochemical level, to function more efficiently and more optimally.
Flowers download code, and this is what I went to Scottsdale, Arizona, and I hung out with Dr. Tiller, who was agreed to be my science advisor. Now, as a much older man, he still is the grandfather of all of these mind-body things, where he is the guy that understood the power of intention and dealt with how you would identify intangibles, things that you can't see physically, that you can't see. So that's why I went to him. So I went to Dr. Tiller, and he's such a, in his own sphere, he's a very renowned and highly respected guy. So it was an honor for me to be with him, just sitting in his living room, chatting comfortably. And he's an absolute genius, but he's a stickler. You don't want to use imprecise language with him, but he's not arrogant at all. He's just not. He's a humble spiritual being, but a highly precise, articulate, very brilliant one. So I was a little reluctant to go with my sort of sloppy intuitive view. And I just said, this is what I perceive. I think if you look at the configuration of a flower, this is an antenna array. And he just laughed and he said, yeah. And he said, oh, by the way, he said, I happen to have a subspecialty in antennas, the physics of antennas. And I said, oh, so yeah, I said, so the flower is there, it's this antenna array, and it is able to receive information from hyperspace. And it goes into the antenna array and is trapped in the water molecule in the moisture level of the petals. And it's held there in a semi-crystalline state because it can trap that code. And I said, now I come in there and the flower is, with my invention, is completely immersed in water, and the entire surface of the flower, no other flower essence company can do that, because you have to use my patented technology to do it. So all of the information in the flower is taken into the water. And Dr. Tiller said, well, yeah, yes, that would happen by something called epitaxial transfer. I said, why? I don't, never heard of that. And he said, yeah, most physicists don't know what that is. But he said it's a way It's what happens in homeopathy. You know how controversial that was when you get a high potency dilution. There's not supposed to be anything there. Well, there's information. There's no Avogadro's number. It's beyond that. There's no substance. So, but there's information. And so the information transfers to the water. And he said, that's what's happening with the flowers. And so they get this pure code from hyperspace. Well, where did the code come from? I thought. I got these messages from the flowers, and sitting there throughout the world in these sacred places, you start getting the sense there is a community of beings there, whether you call them Vedic beings or angels or archangels or ascended masters, which certainly are part of the mix, and all of these high level beings somehow knew, because I'd been involved in this since I was 14, basically. I was treated by the last living physician that had been trained by Rudolf Steiner, the last one, Siegfried Knauer, MD, who's a German physician. And I was treated by him when I was 14, and he lived a few years beyond that. Then he retired in India and died there. But that began my career in the interest of stuff when I was 14. And those beings that are at the high levels of watching the people that come into the flock of that, they knew who I was. And I think they looked at my karmic history and they said, maybe this guy, maybe we can tap this guy on the shoulder and maybe he'll get it. And so at the appropriate time in 2000, then I got the download where I saw clear as a bell how to do this whole process to make the physical apparatus that was later patented. And I prepared my first flower essence, and then for 15 years, that never stopped. And I went all over the world. But so the question always is, who made the code? Where did this code come from?
Right.
Who did you think? No, I didn't think of it. But I was aware through energy psychology being present in the beginning of energy psychology in the middle 1980s in the International College of Applied Kinesiology. I was there in the seminars where those discoveries were discussed, annual meetings, one in particular. And I thought that's fascinating. And so those techniques of energy psychology, I practiced those since 1988. So for 12 years, I was familiar with that. Then I had this vision in 2000. And I thought, cool, I have the techniques to test this. In energy psychology, the critical thing is the language that describes what's going on in the unconscious mind. So I knew right away, if a flower has a benefit in relieving or removing a limiting belief or a disabling belief, I can test it because I have the tools to do that. So I made my first flower essence. I recounted it. It's called Star Spirit Flower, and that's recounted in my book, how I discovered that. That was probably one of the very first things that I made. And I took drops of it and I always do that when I first make an essence, I just took the drops of it. And then I described in the book this crazy thing that happened when I went into this hyperactive state of cleaning and getting rid of clutter. For 2.5 days, I pretty much didn't eat. I just was driven as if it was insane because I took it pure and I bathed myself. I just took a lot of the energy of that stuff. And then I sort of woke up on a Sunday afternoon and said, what have I been doing? What caused me to do this? I did not drink 4 pots of coffee. I mean, that's how my body was acting. And then I thought, oh my God, it was those drops that I took. So then I began contemplating what would cause someone to procrastinate. It is the belief that there are unsolvable, irretrievable issues that you'll never be able to change. And so one of the phrases came up. So that next week, this is almost always what happens. I get a new essence. Somebody came in. And they basically just told me their issue. I just said, how are you? And that's how I start my sessions with patients. What I'm pretty sure you do the same. Most doctors don't have enough time. They won't give enough time. They'll just go to the book. They'll look at their thing. They'll get out their script. They'll write a pad. They'll look at it. Or if they're a holistic doctor, they'll have run some blood test or they'll have done some really cool things, many of which are very interesting, but sometimes in the end are irrelevant. They're interesting, but irrelevant fundamentally. And they'll go through that and they'll say, okay, you need this special form of activated vitamin B6 or something. And then they'll get it. But I don't do that. I say, what's up? I'll often say, what's up? What's up? I just leave it open so that people can, and most of the time, I think in my office, there's some sort of an energy that prompts them to actually tell me exactly what I need to hear, because that's what most of the time happens. They don't say,
Yeah.
well, I was just out playing around at golf and had lunch. That's not what they say. They'll end up saying something like, the weirdest thing happened, or I don't know, I was really thinking about this, you know, and that right away leads into what, and so this person that after I had the star spirit flower, they said, well, there's this, you know, I've been dealing with these, I just can't get myself to move off of this. I'm stuck.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm stuck, Dr. Davis. I'm stuck. Okay. So I pulled out my little flower essence. I did a vibrational match on them, which we'll be teaching in our seminar, the
Yeah.
holistic holographic scanning, which is really, it's a KISS, keep it simple, stupid. It's one of those techniques. It's just not complicated. That's why I
Yeah.
like it. I like stuff that's non-complicated that is hugely effective, because it just makes sense. It saves time in our practice. We can do
Yeah.
something simple and get a big result. So you just match the frequency against the person. And if the person's body goes, whoa, I like this, through an indicator, then you go, aha, okay, they need it. In this case, I did that. I said, okay, they need this, but I don't know what for.
Mhm.
But I know they need it. And that's how I discovered the flower essences. They're test phrases. People say, how did you come up with these? We have the what are called green and blue sheets. You got those, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Sent those
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
you. We ask people to screen those, and we have a training video showing doctors how to do that. And the training videos, like you stream it for a month, most doctors can do it. Not everyone. If a doctor, if a health professional cannot do this, most of the time they are energetically blocked. So
Right.
they need to get work done, get a little bit of, if they've got reversal, if they've got some stuff going on, they need to get that cleared. You know, AK says, well, maybe if you're dehydrated, you know, drink water, because your electrical circuitry is not working right. And you've got to have your body electronics has got to be working well to do that simple technique. But if it is so amazing, because not only for flower essences, but for nutrients, you can screen things, but there's a big caveat. Unless you are like Edgar Casey, who is a true deep level psychic, he had answers for things about which he knew nothing. And that means that if they're accurate, you're truly psychic. In this, and I do not recommend that for anyone unless you were born with that kind of a gift and you know that it's spot on accurate. So what we're trying to do with holographic scanning is not psychic at all.
Yeah.
It's using the ability to either use a database of knowledge that you have or simple visualization. In the case of the flowers, all you're taking is the image of the flower and superimposing it on the energy field of the person. And you're doing it mentally, and you can do it in a second. And when you get good at it, it's very fast. And the body responds right away. And when you know that they need it, then you can try one of the test phrases. In most cases, they're true. But if they're not true, then you discover a new test phrase. That's what's so cool. You figure out for that individual, why do they need that flower? And I
Right.
hope to have an interactive space someday with our professional where doctors can tell what new test codes they have found, what new test phrases they've found.
Yeah.
Because they surely have done that, but people are not communicating, so I don't know that. And as we build a network of higher level professionals that really get this, that would be a cool thing to do. What are the new test phrases? So for star spirit flower, my mistakes are unforgivable. So the language of energy psychology, the finality of the language is very important. When you are in a box and there's no way of escaping it, there's your problem.
Yeah.
So the word is unforgivable. It's unforgivable. That's very final. So if that's believed at some level from some lifetime in some dimension and is held in hyperspace in a memory, and this stuff breaks through the dimensions with the intention that is imbued in the flower, and that was put in by the high level beings that put this stuff in there in the first place. That was where Dr. Tiller's work was. It's this Deltron substance, which he gave it a name. He gave it the name Deltron substance is the connecting link between 4 dimensions and lower and 5th dimension and higher. And there's this space in there, and it's in my book in the science section, which is based on his work. That is the interface where things move from slower than the speed of light to greater than the speed of light. And when they're slower than the speed of light, they're in the electromagnetic realm. And when they're greater than the speed of light, they're in the magnetoelectric realm. They're just the opposite. They're the inverse. They flip. And everything that's in higher dimensions can move greater than light speed. And everything that's in the lower dimensions moves slower than light. And if you kind of average that out, it gives us the speed of light in a vacuum, which is what physics talks about. But that certainly is not limited. It can be much faster than that. And so, but we can't conceive of that, but that's his model with all of his genius of all those years. So intention is the deltron substance that links. And so I asked Dr. Chiller, I said, well, so does it make sense that, you know, the high beings had that intention code? They put that in there. This flower is going to mitigate the belief that someone is stuck in a box with no way out. We're going to put the frequency in there to counter as a countermeasure. So that's what these flowers are. They're all countermeasures to the issues that are disabling society at this time. And the major issue is that we're a slave planet. Now, when I first came up with that concept in the early 2000s, there weren't that many speaking about it. Now there's an awful lot of people. You go on the internet, it's slave planet this, and slave, it's kind of finally people are figuring this out. It's like, wait a minute, who's running this operation here? Why do we feel that we have to do all of these things that the takers have figured out how to get us to follow suit so they can legally steal everything from us? You know, that's the history of neo-colonialism. Colonialism and neo-colonialism, which is just as real now as it was in the 1700s. It's just more camouflage.
Yeah.
But it's people in a position of power thinking that, you know, by hook or crook, they'll just convince a bunch of other people to just go along, and they can continue their scam.
Yeah.
So what breaks that pattern is breaking through individual empowerment and getting rid of the limiting belief. Let me think of okay. So the lady that came in that I had to interview today, I saw a pattern around her, and I said, you know, which is really cool because she wasn't resistant to this. I said, I think if we can shift something, then you'll be in better alignment and you'll be able to work with us better. So let me go and see what flowers you need. So I didn't do an interview. I didn't do psychotherapeutic thing. I didn't ever fill out 40 pages of forms and take an hour or two to go through. And I didn't do 4 years or 6 years of analysis for $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 or whatever somebody spends. All I did was screen her for 51 flowers, the single essences, and 2 of them came up. One of them was maroon deathroot, and maroon deathroot has the phrase, I am destined, remember the significance of the word, I am destined to draw troubled men into my life. So I looked at her and said, after I found the flower, I said, do you have problems with men? And her eyes rolled, and she said, oh my God. I'll tell you about the last one who tried to poison the dog that I love and drown it. You know, she said, there's nothing but a series of these, you know, even borderline sociopathic. I mean, God, yes. Yeah, I had trouble with men. Okay. Yes. Okay, good. Well, we got that flower. And then the next one is Hartman, which is the one that everyone must know about that flower.
Yeah.
The loss of, the person says, and then whatever is significant, you finish it, leaves a hole in my heart. And it's very specific language, hole. Turns out that when clairvoyants look at the energy field, they see a black hole here. And I've had them describe it in 4 different continents. well, Malaysia and Philippines and Japan and Australia and here in the US, they've all said the same thing. There's a black hole there. They can see it in the field energy. And when you give HeartMend, it's gone within 10 minutes most of the time from one application. And now, if it was bad enough, you might need it over several weeks. And we generally have people take it for several weeks. But most of the time, a tremendous transformation is felt either instantaneously or within 2 or 3 days. So she needed HeartMend. So I said, well, I saw that she needed it. And I said, well, so what or who have you lost? She said, and this is common, my little dog. But what was the dog's name? Now, your face was okay. And then I said, what was it? And we'll call it Noodles. That wasn't the name. It was a very cute name. So, and then so she said, the loss of Noodles and down from the tear. Loss of Noodles leaves a hole in my heart. Now, I've seen that on professional athletes. You could see it on prize fighters and boxers. You could see it on huge, rough and tumble guys. You can see it on little old women. It doesn't matter. That breaks. When you get the right phrase, most of the time you'll just see the tear come down. Right. And I can watch it. You can watch it for me and say, well, they'll be dropping in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right when they say the phrase, the loss of. And sometimes they'll say a phrase and I'll say, well, probably not that. What can you think of? What? And then all of a sudden,
yeah,
I've had 60-year-old clients, 60-year-old patients. God, it was my primary school teacher when one day we heard she was dead. She got killed in an accident. I was 6 years old. I said, yeah, you've been carrying that for 54 years.
Yeah.
And their whole nervous system releases that one thought. So there are several that do that. All right. So that's the story of how the flower essences came into being, who devised them, the guys up there. Yeah. And I was fortunate to listen to it and hear that. And, I've worked with herbs and things over eons of time. I have a long history in that. It's not like this didn't just happen last week. And as many of us that are in the healing arena, we've done this stuff before. And so, I don't know how that happened, but at any rate, I'm glad it did, because it's been a very special part of life. So I want to just end with one little story, and then we're going to call it. I think we'll come back to this, right? We sure want
more, of course.
Information, but I think I mentioned it actually, that the lady that I saw here that might become an employee. Just want to end with that for women, because I hope it becomes more famous. I've had many occasions where mothers who had been successful patients brought in their daughters, because I tell them to. I would say, gosh, bring your kids in, because if we can identify these patterns when they're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and we shift them, we're going to change the whole trajectory of their life.
Yes.
But it's absolutely this. Every time I would almost weep. And so particularly for girls, because I hate to see it when women, there's equally problematic problems for little guys, but when girls they fall into this social pattern, and especially if there's attractive personalities or attractive physically, they then they're targeted, and all kinds of things start to come at them. Yes. Because of their appearance, their beauty, their vivaciousness, whatever. And you can see that in little young girls. Certainly by the time they're junior high school, but junior high. And who do they attract? What comes into their life? And if you can, when I screen a little child, it works for guys as well, but it's primarily for little girls. And I find that they need the flower called marine beetroot. I take their mother aside later and said, we can't prove it. Because if it never happens, well, you can't prove it. But I believe we're going to save this girl an awful lot of problem relationships.
Yeah.
So give it to her now, and she will never have that mess of stuff throughout life with bad relationships. Let's get rid of it now. And she's 10, 11, or 12 years old. And the flower is marine buckwheat. The test phrase is destiny, that powerful word. I am destined to attract troubled men into my life. And that's who they attract. And they're primed to want that, and then they don't want it. They do and they don't. But I have treated, God, certainly well over 100. There were just classic examples of, you can look at them. They're in their 30s or their 40s, and they're in their third or fourth, or maybe they got out of it. And then historically, in this case, the woman I saw today, she said, I thought I had gotten rid of all that. I said, no, I think it ran pretty deep in you. Didn't you have a bunch of those when you were a young gal? She said, oh, yeah. She said, I had, narcissists and just pathologic liars and that. And so she came up. I said, well, traces of it are still there. You need marine buckwheat. But you can actually, with no history, and I've done this, you can get a room full of people. And in this case, you get a room, and I did this with 10 or 12 little young gals. They had their moms. We had a mamas gathering with their little daughters. I just said, let's do this for the heck. This is just totally a cool experiment. And just see the ones that come up from marine buckwheat. Then they come up with other stuff. I'd find other things. But that one, when they came up with that, oh boy, take this if you want to change your relationship. And that's one thing. And then they have to be able to receive love for their life. So there are strategies of using some of these flower essences, which people can just, and they do, they order them. They just order them with their intuition. They order them online. Mm-hmm. Can you go to the website and look at, just pull up the combination essences? Let's go to room support. So, yeah. This is a remedy. That's me in the picture. On one of my expeditions into the high Andes, that's about 14,000 feet, 13,000. I'm hiking at about 13,000 feet. And it's just, some of the flowers up here are beyond human description. And a couple of them are in this, and then other amazing ones come from the Philippines. But if you just start either this or Revive All, almost everyone benefits from one or the other. We could go on and on. We'll talk more.
Absolutely, Doc, and I sincerely appreciate it. I think one of the things I always like to do, if you got 90 seconds, is ask folks if you could have 90 seconds of the entire world's time, and everyone would listen and understand what you were saying, what would you want to tell everyone?
Stop suffering. Stop suffering for invisible things that are affecting your life that you don't know about, for which the wonderful guides and guardians and God and Christ and Buddha and everybody else that's given good things to this planet, they stuck a whole lot of countermeasures into these flowers to help us. You say seamlessly. It is most of the time rather seamless. Yeah. So the cost of it, like I say, one psychological assessment will pay for a whole bunch of these remedies. It's a divine dispensation. So flowers are sacred substance. And so I say, how privileged we are to hold sacred substance in our hand. And those bottles are sacred substance, because the frequency that was put into them was extracted, and in our case, has very few energetic disturbances before it gets in the bottle and goes out to you. It goes directly from wherever it was in the high Andes or the Philippines or Bali or the Dominican Republic or Jamaica, and it comes directly. And then we put it in this bottle, and it's as little handling as you can get. And so they are sacred substance. It's always a cool thing to get sacred. And you know, you don't have to be a religious person, but it's been touched. I'd say it's been touched by the divine. So whenever you can get that, it's a good thing.
It is. Yeah. Thank you so much, Doc. I appreciate every moment of your time. I sincerely do.
All right. We'll sign off.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.